Thanks, Mark David. Thanks, Alex. That was beautiful. So I'm Will. Thanks for joining me today on this super, super hot July day. I want to take you back for a second, back to March 2020. When I first got the sense that it would be a while before I'd see my family again in person, I started setting up some video calls to read aloud to my nibblings. They were 8 and 12 at the time, now they're 10 and 14. We've been joined by a bunch of other relatives and friends over these 2 years, and for 28 months, I've just kept reading into a webcam. That's 13 books so far. When we finish a book, we vote for the next one, but the vote is super predictable lately. Everybody wants the next installment of Spy School. We're on book 7 of Spy School. That's Spy School British Invasion. This particular book is great for me because I get to do a British accent that only a child could love. I love reading aloud, especially trying to capture a different voice. The human voice is such a flexible, amazing instrument, and everybody uses it in such a different way. Your voice is so incredibly dense with information, with all kinds of clues about who you are and who you want to be, clues about the habits of speech and the habits of life that led you to this moment. Your voice can contain information that you didn't even know yourself, right? Have you ever said something out loud about what you felt or believed, and you hear it in the air, and you're like, oh, wait, that's not quite right, is it? Right? Or maybe there's been something that's bubbling inside you, and you say it out loud for the first time, and it just rings. And you're like, oh, that's more true than I knew. That matters more than I let myself believe. Has that ever happened to you? Yeah. So that's been happening to me more as I work on trying to develop a speaking voice that's more in line with my gender identity. This voice it's not where I want it to be yet, like not at all, but every once in a while I hear that ring in it and I think, oh, this is more true than I knew. This matters more than I let myself believe. So anyway, Spy School is great. Every chapter ends with a cliffhanger, and everyone on the call makes this Macaulay Culkin surprise face and says, dun, 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 right? So I figured we might try that together today. Whenever there's a dramatic moment today, instead of amen or like work it, Lucas, we could just go dun, dun, dun instead. Can I get a dun, dun, dun? Dun, dun, dun. Oh, that was amazing. You guys are so good. You all are so good. Thank you so much. Okay, cool, awesome. I'm gonna introduce you to some of the Spy School cats, and we can practice that together. So this is the voice of Ben Ripley. He's our 13-year-old protagonist. He gets recruited into Spy School, which is, great work, a school for kids who are spies. Okay, that wasn't really super surprising, so sorry about that one. The cliffhangers are gonna get better. I love that Ben is the center of this story because he's surrounded by like super spies who can drive jet skis and do ninja flips, but his heroic superpower is really knowing his weaknesses and being curious and asking for help. And those habits lead him to a voice which has a bunch of question marks in it, but it also has this like leaning forward, really super ready quality that I love about him. At Spy School, Ben meets star student Erica Hale. Erica closely guards her deepest secret, which is that she really likes kitten posters and throw pillows. Erica has this habit of preserving emotional distance, and so her voice has become precise and tight. It turns out that spying runs in Erica's family. Her dad, Alexander Hale, is a very famous, very charming spy who looks really great in a suit. But he's actually really, really bad at his job.
Alexander's habit is lying about what a great spy he is, and so his voice is always trying much too hard to dazzle you.
So I've known for a long time, like all of us know, that people's inner lives can show up in their voices. But until the beginning of this year, I thought my voice and my inner life were doomed to be separate. The testosterone that my body produced for most of my life thickens the vocal cords, causing the voice to deepen. Stopping testosterone and taking estrogen doesn't reverse the change. So I thought I was stuck somewhere around here with this voice just for the rest of my life. Or if I tried to speak in a more feminine voice, it was just going to sound like some kind of a cartoon. But then I discovered this really amazing movement of trans people helping one another find voices that work better for them, no matter what kind of gender identity they have. The beauty and power of these new voices that I heard, that these people have built from scratch with their bare hands, so different from where they started, gave me so much hope for my own life. So, like what some people call passing, having your gender correctly read right away, it's a nuanced and fraught subject for trans people, and I'm not going to dig into that too much today, except to be clear that trans and gender non-conforming people make lots of different choices for really good reasons, and their identities are still real, right? But if I can develop a voice that people effortlessly read as feminine, I will get gendered correctly more often. It might help out people who have known me for a while but haven't really totally gotten my gender identity to understand me better. And it'll give me some more control over how visibly transgender I am in any given moment, which could reduce my risk of harassment or violence. And maybe it might just sound more like me, right? To be clear, what you're hearing now is nowhere near those voices that inspired me. This is more like the before than the after. It often takes people about a year to get a new voice down, and I've really only been practicing for 7 or 8 weeks. So if you've ever practiced a complex skill like that, like dancing or acting or an instrument or a sport, you've probably done a bunch of exercises that seem kind of silly. You passed around an imaginary ball of energy, or you spend 10 minutes just leaning from one side to another to become a better dancer. Maybe you've also worked to change your voice, maybe for reasons like mine or any of the other dozens of different reasons that people work to change their voice. Maybe you've done some of the same exercises I had, like panting like a dog, or talking through a straw into a glass of water, or saying over and over again, heat from fire, fire from heat, heat from fire. We often need these funny-looking rituals to change, to isolate the different pieces of a new way of being and to practice them one at a time. But ultimately, to get where you're going, you gotta just set the exercises aside for a little while. You'll come back to them later, and just go into the world and talk. When you're trying to change your voice, like I am, doing that, going out into the world and talking, it can feel like you're doing a character. There's a bunch of reasons that feeling makes things hard. One is that there's a highly organized political movement working to keep trans folks from getting the healthcare and legal protections and dignity that we need, and they're telling a story that says my gender is pretend. So if my voice isn't perfect and natural sounding, which it isn't yet, if it isn't feminine enough, if it's too feminine, somebody out there is going to take that as evidence that trans identities are just involved in inconvenient kind of pretend. So that makes the stakes feel so high that it's hard to start. But also, changing my vocal habits is hard in the same way that changing our habits is hard for all of us all the time. I'm trying to get to a more authentic expression of who I am, but I also have to make so many decisions to sound different that aren't natural at first. The people around me developed a picture of who I really was based on how they saw me perform, and now I don't match the picture. Will anybody believe that my new voice is my real voice? Can I have a new voice that's really my real voice? But one morning, I had a long voice practice session, and then I went into work, and I had a work meeting first thing in the day. This is my work voice. It's a little bit like my old voice, but it's a little bit more precise. And I came into my work meeting, and I said, "Hey, coworker." And in that moment, I noticed, that was good. I left a lot of room between those two. You remembered. I'm so glad. I had made a ton of decisions to make my voice sound the way it sounded. I thought of my old voice as just kind of spilling out of me naturally, and I was afraid that trying to build one was an artificial task. But my old voice was also artificial. It was also built out of my habits. I had, in fact, already changed my voice in tons of ways. Just one example, as a teenager, I kind of tried to take up as little space as possible, and my voice sounded like really quiet and strained as a result, like I was trying to disappear all the time. And then I learned more about singing. I did a ton of singing exercises, and I developed a more open and a deeper voice that was more resonant. And then I hated how masculine this voice sounded, and gradually over time, just by sort of backing away from it, over time it drifted back to a more androgynous pitch while still retaining that openness that the vocal exercises had given me. Our school spies also change their voices as they change, because all of them, like all of us, are always changing. Alexander, remember him? He eventually admits that he's been making up basically everything about his spy career. He's not used to telling the truth, and his speech becomes more uncomfortable. But he's actually a better spy, though still not a great one, when he is real with his teammates about his limits. And slowly, his voice takes on some of the emotional range that a more authentic voice has. How about you? How is your voice changing? How do you want it to change? I'm going to give you some homework. Dun, dun, dun. Here are 3 questions you can ask yourself about your next voice. Pick one that you feel drawn to reflect on over the next few weeks. This first question, where is your voice ringing these days? If you pay attention to the qualities of your voice over the course of a day, its shifts in tone, when you can't get the words out fast enough and when you're silent, where do you see signs of truth and new life? Or clues about what you're being called to? When does the truth really ring in your voice? Here's another option. What voice would support your faithfulness? When you think about the changes that you're working on, maybe in yourself, maybe in the world, are there ways that you could practice that way of being in the way that you talk? What voice would support your faithfulness? And finally, maybe you might want to think about how your voice is being changed by your choices. Your voice is going to change to reflect how you use it, right? So is it changing in the right ways? How is your voice being changed by your choices? So that homework, it's all extra credit. Pick one. Where is your voice ringing? What voice would support your faithfulness? How is your voice being changed by your choices. I don't know yet what my voice will ultimately sound like. I know that I want it to be warm and clear and expressive and confident. I'm going to keep practicing all those animal noises to try to get there. But I also have faith that if I love others, I speak the plain truth about the challenges that are facing us, I show up with my full self, I refuse to disappear, then that's going to do as much as any vocal exercise to make my voice one that I can be proud of. And I believe that the rituals of my vocal exercises can help me strengthen the habit of being that person. We can change, a better world is possible, and our next voices are waiting to be lifted up, to lift one another up. When you go out from here, may you be blessed to hear that ring in your voice. Oh, that's true. Oh, that matters. More and more clearly each day. We are those voices. We are the voices that can make a new world, and by speaking, give it to each other. And that's at least one thing worth living for.